that you can no more argue about the rightness or wrongness of something than that you can argue as to whether a certain piece of music is beautiful with somebody who doesn't have a developed taste for it. Sentiment, feeling, taste. And there are places where Hume uses the word taste also. And it's not surprising, therefore, that people who respond to this emphasis on feeling try to argue that aesthetic judgment is also rational judgment, not only moral judgment, but aesthetic judgment. So that there is some objective truth about aesthetic values, something objective about moral values. Now, as far as Hume is concerned, these are all subjective. And as critics of Hume, like Thomas Reid, point out, what has happened historically is something like this. Once the theory of ideas was introduced, primary qualities became subjective. I take it back, secondary qualities became subjective. Okay. Then with Berkeley, not only secondary but primary qualities became subjective. With secondary qualities subjective, color, sound, beauty became subjective. And with David Hume, belief became not a matter of rational judgment, but something subjective, a matter of feeling. And what was left but for moral belief to be subjective also? So it's traced to the influence of the theory of ideas subjectivizing what previously had been regarded as objective all the way down the line. The Scottish realists hold that primary qualities and secondary qualities are both objective. That aesthetic and moral values are both objective. That belief is a rational intuition, not just a psychological response. So the issue is pretty well defined in that way. And Hume is trying to formulate his view. Now, Hume is a man of moderation. He refuses to buy the idea that reason is the basis of morals. He refuses to buy the idea that sentiment or feeling alone is the basis of morals. Sure. And just as it was with the abstruse and the practical, the logical and the psychological, he's like the little boy offered two kinds of pie. Which would you like? A little bit of each, if you please. He wants a combination of the two. Now, you see, he tried to pull that off in religion. Can he pull it off in ethics? That's what he tries to do. Okay? Well, if reason has a role in relationship to ethics for Hume, what is its role? Well, remember that reason for Hume can produce two kinds of judgments, and only two. Judgments about the relations of ideas, and judgments about matters of fact. So the question about the role of reason is, what knowledge do we have related to ethics, relations of ideas, matters of fact? Sounds simple. Well, relations of ideas, yes, definitions of moral terms. Definitions of moral terms. That is to say, if we say justice is such and such, definition is a relation of ideas. Subject and predicate are agreeing in the definition. So we can define moral terms. We can talk, for instance, about the relationship of different moral concepts. The relationship, for instance, between benevolence and self-interest. Right, they don't exactly agree with each other, do they? Knowledge has to do with the agreement and disagreement. You see. All right, so that's one thing that reason can do. Second thing has to do with matters of fact. Reason can describe the circumstances in which we have to act, can provide us with factual knowledge about situations that we face, with factual understanding of the possible consequences of actions. Okay? So reason contributes in those ways. Now notice that last phrase, consequences of actions, because one of the main links between reason and feeling is going to be utility. He's a pre-utilitarian utilitarian. At least if you mark the beginning of utilitarianism with Bentham and Mill. It's from David Hume, they really get the idea. What then is the role of, what then can reason not do? Reason cannot justify appealing to consequences and utility. No. Oh, it might, as a matter of prudence, might tell you to be prudent. See, but why do you want to be prudent? It can't really justify appeals to utility. It cannot motivate you to want to do something. And it cannot approve or disapprove an action. It can just describe consequences. Now, if reason cannot approve or disapprove an action, you can't make moral judgments. Moral judgments approve or disapprove. So reason can make no moral judgments. And inasmuch as responses of feeling are not judgments, feelings are not true or false. Only propositions, judgments are true or false. Inasmuch as feelings are not true or false, feelings make no moral judgments. There are no moral judgments. You see? Now, there are moral sentiments. There are moral feelings that give rise to utilitarian statements. All right, what about sentiment? What's the role of sentiment? Well, I said that the common ground is utility. And you can see how reason hitches onto utility. How does sentiment hitch a ride on utility? Well, you see, utility, the consequences that are for the common good of everybody, utility is based on the feeling of benevolence. Benevolence is wishing, wanting, willing what is good for others. A sentiment of benevolence. Beneficence is doing what's good, benevolence is wanting what's good. But why are we that way inclined in our feelings towards others? Hobbes had said, we're not. We're all like ravenous beasts. And Hume argues against egoism. Hobbes had been accused of a radical egoism, and in Hume's day, the term Hobbism was an epithet of disdain for a view that really I don't think Hobbes held, that there is not a shred of friendliness or anything else in a human being, naturally, you see. Well, Hume argues against that. He's arguing that there is a natural benevolence in all human beings, a natural altruism in all human beings. Oh, in varying degrees. He's not saying how much. It varies in degree greatly. But there is some natural benevolence. Now, there, sort of by nature, how does it develop? And he's dealing with sort of a developmental moral psychology, you see. Well, it develops out of a feeling of sympathy. Develops out of feeling of sympathy. Sympathy which involves, as I feel sympathy, either pleasure for you or pain with you. Oh, I feel for you, we say. I feel for you, you see. So that there is, self-interest involved there in the pain or pleasure that I feel. But why would I feel sympathy? I feel sympathy because reason tells me of factual similarities between you and me, your experience and mine. And remember, one of the principles of association? Resemblance. Resemblance. So when there are resemblances between your experience and mine, the complex ideas that develop in my mind involve both of us. Yeah. And because they involve both of us, I feel not just for me, but for you. And there is a natural benevolence in all human beings, you see. Well, this then is the essence of his position. His is two ways in which this theory is labeled. This is an ethical subjectivism, and it's an ethical naturalism. Now, let me explain those terms. They're current to this day in ethical theory. Ethical subjectivism is the view that there are no objective moral qualities. There are no objective truths of an ethical sort about objective states of affairs. But rather, when I say something is wrong, or something's good, I'm talking about my own feelings, my own sentiments. So that in this case, you see, where out of benevolence I feel with you, and I say, that's too bad what you had to go through. What I'm really doing is saying, I'm suffering.